my phone, hope that picks that up. That's a quacking noise my phone's making. Tom Loats, I'm a retired captain with the Overland Park Fire Department. Kind of a threefold process. I was in Boy Scouts, and that kind of piqued my interest in EMS, or I guess first aid at the time. So once I got out of Boy Scouts and got into high school, I started thinking about the EMT class and kind of progressed from there. I worked at the infamous John Francis restaurant in downtown Overland Park, and Jim and John, who both work here or had worked here, their dad, Don, was the owner of the restaurant, and he was a volunteer fireman. And we had a plectron, or he had a plectron, the old tube and knob, and it would go off and he'd go on a call, and either Jim or John or somebody around would kind of tell me what was taking place. So, you know, after years of listening to that, I kind of picked up on some of the 10 codes of the day and figured out what was going on. So that was my second peak. And then my third one, I was after high school, and I wanted to get into public service, and I didn't know if I wanted to be a policeman or a fireman. So I did a ride-along with the police department, with Overland Park Police Department. And you could do ride-alongs. I went on a Friday and Saturday night. And then I went and did a ride-along. I lived in the city of Merriam. I went and did a ride-out for a 12-hour period with the fire department at Merriam, and I met Ed Zeller, who in turn became my first captain. Rode out with them for 12 hours, and after the 12 hours of being at the fire station, I was like, this is an easy decision. They were cutting up at the station, and you know, it looked like a brotherhood, and then the rest is history. I got hired by Chief Fredericks back in the day, probably 1983. And Ed was my first captain and my only captain while I worked at Merriam. And I left there in '87 and came to Overland Park. Overland Park, it was just the state of the art. Everything was, that's where you wanted to go to work. In 1985, 1986, 87, there was a lot of big hirings, and everybody wanted to work for Overland Park. It was the best wages, and that's my phone again. When I got hired, there was a 2-day testing process. I think there was 600 people applied. And we had the test next door from Station 1 at the Legion Hall, 300 people each day. And it was like a civil service test with which gear is going this way, and then math. And so it went from there, and they hired 12. And I got the letter at my parents' house. I was living in Merriam, but I wanted to make sure somebody got it. I sent it to my parents' house, and my mom called me up, and I was working the day at Merriam when I got the letter, so I took the chief's car from Merriam to my house, or my folks' house, and got the letter saying that I was hired, and he had already known that I was hired at the time, so I guess they probably talked to each other. So I came back and left Merriam. That would have been in 1987, got hired here in June, and spent 31 years here at Overland Park. First shift, that was to Station 1. Daryl Cordell was my captain, who's just recently passed away, and Johnny Myers was my lieutenant, and he passed away several years prior to that. But Frank Emery was one of the firefighters. Paul Gangle, who's got a colorful history here, everybody remembers Paul. Grant Warnicki and John Francis joined about a year later. Grant joined about 6 months later, and then John Francis came about a year after that. But my first ambulance partner was Paul Gangle, so yeah, it was quite a shift. Frank Emery would play his guitar in the shower, so other guys wouldn't hear it, or maybe he had better sound in there, but I remember Frank, so I kind of remember my first night going into the station. Frank was in the shower playing his guitar, and I thought, what did I get myself into? It was more structured as far as what was expected of you. We still wore our classic uniforms, but it was more, I don't want to say military, because it was really never military, but you were expected to show up every day with your badge, and I mean, it was not that we had, and some shifts I think did have a inspection in the morning. We were not one of those. In my Merriam days, we would stand up, we would still ride tailboard. You'd stand up, you'd put your air pack on, you'd turn around, you'd stand up and grab the grab rail, and you'd look over the top of the truck as you were going down the road. And about the time I came to Overland Park, that was kind of nixed. We had the man saver bars, which used to keep people from falling off the truck when they were standing up looking over the top. And then the next step after that was seat belts. And many, many years after that came enclosed cabs. And but for my first probably 8 to 10 years at Overland Park, they were open cabs. Some of the cabs were better than others. I remember some of them were really short cabs, so you'd run a call and you were raining, you'd scooch way back in the jump seat so you wouldn't get wet. The gutters along the top were not really good, so if you'd make a left turn or a right turn, sometimes you'd know the water was coming and you'd crunch over into one corner, keep that dump of water from coming in on you. About 1988, went to Station 4, and I stayed the bulk of my career at Force. Was out in 95 and 96, I was in prevention. Did inspections. It was required at the time to do 2 years or 18 months in inspections to take a lieutenant's test. And I was in there with Chief Brian Rettelsheimer and Chief Mark Messenger, all three of us at the same time. I was promoted to lieutenant shortly thereafter that. I was lieutenant for about 3 years, and was at Station 4 that whole time. Captain Harp was my captain. Got promoted at Station 4, and that's when I went from Station 4A to Station 4B. So I became a B shift captain there, and I was a captain at Station 4B for a long time. Well, I'll say a long time, 6 years I think down at 4B. And 6 years ago I went to Station 3 when Raleigh retired. And then when Captain Grove retired at Station 5, I went down there. We really kind of fight fire when it all comes down to it the same way, but it's our mindset of how we're going to fight fire. If there's nothing worth saving, 25 years ago we would just rush into a house. I mean, we wouldn't really do a good size up and do a good action plan. Now we pull up, you know, and it's the risk-benefit gain is the first thing you start thinking about. If it's a completely involved home, you go defensive and you don't send guys inside until, you know, you get positive pressure. So, you know, I say you still go inside and put out fire like we always used to, but it's not how we fight fire, I guess it's why we fight fire now. So we fight fire now if we can go inside and make a rescue and save a piece of property with the lowest amount of risk. So I guess how, we still do it, but why, that's what's really changed. Good calls, I mean, you think of the calls, and there were several throughout my career where people would come back to the station afterwards and thank you, where you really truly made a difference. I mean, those were always impounding. I know one was, I was at Station 4, and I don't think I was a lieutenant yet. We ran a car wreck at 125th and Antioch, going into where the training center is. So it was the first year the training center was open, and a kid got hit on his side. He was in the passenger seat of the car and hit the car hard enough that the dad that was driving broke some ribs from the console, so the kid was in between that. And he had the corticate posturing, and you know, we all thought at the scene that there was no way this kid would survive. And about 6 months later, this kid came walking into the station with his dad and thanked us, and it was emotional, and it was just a very cool event. I think back about the house fire up in downtown Overland Park. Jim Deneen was in charge. It was a house, and then attached to the back of the house was a print shop. So, but it was all tied together. And go back to Grant Warnicki and Mark Messenger were up in the attic, and something tipped over out in the paint shop or the print shop and flashed, and they were up in there and things got really bad really quickly. And the house filled with black smoke, and we knew they were up in the attic. And I came through the front hallway trying to pull more hose. We were in the back, and I was met with a pair of feet that were dangling through the rafters. So I pushed the feet back up in there, and unbeknownst to me, they turned sideways, cleared the air pack, and fell back down through. Hollered at George Asinger, was right outside the front porch, and he said, "What do you need?" And I said, "We need a crew." I said, "There's guys still up in the attic." Found the attic scuttle hole, and I remember pulling the line back, and pulled it all the way back to me, and there was no one on it. So I'm thinking, this is a bad deal. About then, all the air horns went off, and it was evacuate the structure, everybody get out. So went back down, I crawled out through the front door, and I remember somebody was standing there. I said, "Where's Grant?" And they said, "He's in the ambulance." And I wouldn't believe it until I walked over to the ambulance and saw him in the backseat of the ambulance. So both him and Grant or both him and Mark were, I guess, smoking when they rolled out the front yard. There's good ones and bad ones. I mean, one of the most recent ones that has stuck in my brain was, I was at this station and with my last crew that I worked with, and we ran a code on a 14-year-old female gal, and we rolled up there and looked just like my daughter laying there on the floor. So, I mean, it was, and I still think about it. I mean, it was a difficult call to run. Probably the most difficult call I ran in my career. Don't keep it to yourself. I mean, I think, whatever shift you're on, I mean, come back and you discuss it amongst the shift, and then you're going to have the professional counselors come in, but continue talking about it with your shift mates when you're done. I mean, everybody saw the same thing, and I mean, if you bottle it in and keep it inside yourself, it doesn't do you any good. I mean, you keep bringing those things back up, and yeah, discuss it with your shift mates. Yeah, when I started, it was, the majority of our calls were fire calls. And now, today, I mean, by far the majority of our calls are EMS calls. And, you have to be happy running your calls. I mean, think about it, my saying to my kids is be nice and use your brain. And that'll get you a long ways in the fire service too. Be nice and use your brain. My kids are gonna see that and start laughing, but that's what I've told them for years. Here I'm leaving after 31 years, not leaving exactly on my terms, but it's a tough situation, but everybody's been very supportive of me through the whole thing, and I look at it as here I'm leaving a career after 31 years. I'm still relatively healthy, and I just have to make the best of what's been dealt to me. So kind of play the cards you're dealt. Tina's going to retire in a couple years, so me and Tina will probably do some traveling. We bought a little camper, and we've already tried it out and like it well. My youngest daughter, Abby, is finishing up. She's got 2 years left of high school, so Tina will be retired in 2 years, so that'll work out. So I'll have 2 years to kind of get my feet wet on the retirement thing and traveling and stuff, but probably not a lot for the next 2 years. I say that, and I've got a really, really busy summer. I mean, I leave June 2nd, and I come home August 23rd. So, and it's all fishing and goofing off and fun, and then hunting season starts. In the fire service, with one parent being gone for 24 hours is difficult. And me and Tina have had 2 parents gone for 24 hours at a time, so it's twice as difficult. So I want to thank my kids for, 30 years of the fire service. My oldest son, Ben, is 27, Miranda's 23, Jack's 21, soon to be 22, and Abby's 16, and they've put up with a lot of missed birthdays and soccer games and baseball games. So thank you to all my kids. Thank you to my wife Tina for 30 years of marriage this year, and had a long, great career. I appreciate everything everybody's done. That's a quacking noise my phone's making. Love what you do and do what you love. I can feel it vibrate. That happens to be a pastime. Yeah. I've loved being a fireman. I still love every minute of it. Yeah, been very fortunate.